to start off with, I picked the title, the Don't Hesitate, Communicate, because there are two factors here when we're dealing with being supervisors and talking to our subordinates, employees, staff members, whatever you might call them. And the first thing is, I'm going to start with the very top of this title, is the don't hesitate part. So there's two questions, like how do we hesitate to communicate and why do we hesitate? So I'll tackle one, and I put a bunch of words and reasons up here. Is first of all, how we hesitate in communicating is a couple different things. One, we jump off by assuming. Now, I'm sure they already know. So that's one way that we hesitate to communicate. Sometimes we hesitate to communicate by telling our employees something only once, by not following up with them or not holding them accountable to what we're trying to communicate. And also we avoid and try to hesitate to communicate when we give vague instructions. So then you look at the internal, like, okay, what is it, like, why do we hesitate? Maybe some of you are out there like, I don't hesitate, I can talk to them, it's just that I have a problem with the delivery. Well, we'll get to that in a second. But some of us are not very confident, or we hesitate to communicate because we have a bunch of stuff. I mentioned the first one here, fear. Fear of how we come across, fear of them not following your instructions, being absolutely just to stop doing it. Sometimes we hesitate because we're too busy. We think it takes too much time to take the time to communicate and do it in the correct manner, because it should not be a quick event. It should take the time, whatever time necessary, to actually get across the message. Some people hesitate to communicate because they're avoiding confrontation. They don't want to have those tough conversations. Now, not every type of communication you have is going to be a conflict or a corrective type of thing, but often we do hesitate to follow that because we don't want to start an argument or have to challenge an employee or correct them, and some people just avoid confrontation at all costs. Another reason why we hesitate is going back to the same word again, assuming. This is, instead of the last one where how is like, I'm sure they already know, this one is the feeling of, well, they should know. They should know what they should have to do. Shouldn't have to tell them this all the time. So we just don't communicate because we assume that they should already know what they need to know. Sometimes we hesitate because our expectations are too high. So we'll talk about that a little bit much. Sometimes we hesitate because I mentioned before, we have a lack of confidence. Just stepping up in front of people, whether it's one-on-one or even in a group, we lack the confidence to really step up and lead. And so that's a barrier to our communication. And that can be sometimes because you just simply don't know how. And that can be very intimidating if you really feel you're not a good communicator or you don't know how to do it effectively. And then instead of trying to overcome that, we just avoid it altogether, which obviously it would not be healthy or helpful. So there's a mix of external and internal reasons that we hesitate to communicate effectively, consistently, and clearly. So if some of these hesitations resonate with you, your issues may be less about your communication with your staff and more to do with your internal struggles or stuff that you're dealing with. But there is help, and you can overcome these things. You can learn how to kind of build that confidence, learn how to effectively communicate. We'll talk a little bit about that today. But just so you know, you're not, if this is where you are, you feel you're struggling this way because you don't have the confidence or don't have the know-how, you can learn, you can grow as a communicator. So let's get on to that. That's what you're all here for. You weren't here for the hesitation part because you might know your own struggles. You're here to communicate. So communicate. But before we get in, I guarantee you there are a lot of people saw, oh yeah, this webinar is about getting my people to do what I say and how do I get them to go forward in my direction. But let me just pause, and this is where the little challenge comes in. Before we jump to blaming our employees for not knowing how to do their jobs or failing to do what you tell them to do, we really need to stop and take a look at ourselves and see if we are communicating as effectively as we think we are. So stop to consider this. Is it less about your employees simply not doing what you asked them to do, and possibly more about them being unsure of what you're asking them to do. If they don't seem to understand what they're supposed to be doing, is it because they didn't pay attention, or could it be that they are not trained to a level of competence to do their job independently or effectively? So there might be some supervisors out there right now not too pleased with me saying that, because they feel it's their employee's job to figure this stuff out. But honestly, that's simply not true. One of the most important jobs in managing and leading people is making sure that the employees know what needs to be done, how they fit into the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish, and give the knowledge and training needed to successfully do their job. That's the management role, besides managing the day-to-day. It's our job in the supervisor role to ensure that that happens, that information, that communication takes place. That's kind of why we're there to supervise, is to make sure they know what they're supposed to be doing, when, how, the whole bit. And they need to be taught and trained. Even sometimes an employee that's been with you for years. If you're giving them something new to do, you can't just assume that they'll just automatically know exactly what they need to do. So if you think in this day and age that you can just continue to throw people into the fire and learn as they go, then you will probably continually have the frustrations that you might be experiencing now. You might just keep perpetuating that same cycle. So the only real options for change is either one, you change yourself as a supervisor to better communicate and equip, or you pay a lot more for a much more highly skilled employee that needs far less instruction. Because those people are out there, but they will cost you a lot. And I'm guessing not many people on here are looking for that approach. They want to take the people they have and try to better them and get them moving forward. But trust me, yeah, you can get someone who's highly qualified and won't need much instruction at all to do your work. But then comes the cost. And a lot of the work we do, we just need some regular folks to get it done, and we just need to work on better communicating with them. So as I developed kind of tips on how we can better communicate, I found a theme. My name again is Chad. Communicate starts with C. Chad starts with C. So I decided to just go with C. So not A or B, I chose C. So here's just a few things we're going to talk about today when it comes to better communication and how to get your employees on board and understanding exactly what their role and their duties are. So the very first thing I'll start with, a non-C word, is train them well. If we start from the very beginning when someone's new, it's a lot easier to fill an empty vessel with some really good information than it is to take a vessel who's been around and has a bunch of experience and try to retrain or change those things. So for those of you who have younger employees, or ones that are just first or just returning to the workforce, that have to be younger, could be returning to, don't have a lot of stuff in that kind of mix of job training or whatever, train them well at the beginning and you'll save yourself a ton of headaches and any future employers of theirs. Not that you're doing it for the future, but train them well. So we'll start off with the first C, clarity. Clarity is about setting clear expectations, clear boundaries, clearly defined duties and roles. It's being clear on the instructions that you give your employees. So when you have to talk about whether it's day-to-day stuff, you're making sure it's not muddled down with a ton of details, because you want to get to the heart of the matter and make sure that the most important things are understood. That there's not an extra, that you're not speaking above the level of your employee. That's important. Using terminology, language that they understand, and if they don't understand what you're saying, you need to educate them. So when you're speaking on important matters, make sure you also, again, this is the clarity thing, speak directly to it and don't waste time with long and drawn out stories that can cause your listener to wander, their mind to wander, because they're just like, what are you getting to your point here? So stay clear. Make sure you ask them whether they understand what you've told them. There's the clarity part. Do you understand what I'm asking you to do? And be willing to further explain any of your points. This is also part, we'll jump down a little bit, I'm going to skip ahead to my self-control part. Make sure you keep your frustration level, because depending on who the person you're trying to help them or communicate to them, what might seem easier to you may not be so much for them. So make sure you're controlling yourself and having the patience and willingness to further explain any of your points if they are not understanding what you're trying to communicate. Don't expect someone just to know what you are saying, even if it's crystal clear in your mind, because it may be totally mud in their mind. So work to speak as clearly as possible. Keep it simple is a great one when giving even complex tasks you might have in a job or a role can be explained in its kind of lowest denominator and down to a simplistic step-by-step manner. So sometimes it's figuring out as we communicate, are the instructions clear? Are they making sense? This is where you really want to pull in others, not rely just on yourself. When trying to make instructions or give instructions, ask a colleague or another supervisor, does this make sense? Am I making sense here? Because of this, I give them this instruction manual, work through these few, and people keep getting this wrong. So what is it? Maybe you're not communicating as clearly as you think you are. So make sure you look for opportunities to test yourself, ask for feedback. Speaking of feedback, the next line is consistency. And this is feedback is part of that, being consistent in your communication. If your employee is received the initial, hopefully very clear instructions from you, as you follow up with them, they need to hear if they're doing it right. This is again, don't hesitate to correct or encourage or even to redirect someone. But they need feedback. They need consistent feedback to know whether or not they're actually understanding. And this also refers to their defined duties with consistency. All right, is their responsibilities and assigned duties, are they constantly changing? Are they confused about what they're supposed to be doing because the work plan is jumping all over the place? Now, granted, some of our jobs, some of the work that you out there might have for them to do, it does change, and it has to change, and you have to be flexible. I understand that's tougher. That's a little more tougher to be consistent with because it's continually changing. But a lot of the duties we have that's why you have job descriptions. They're pretty much the standard. This is what you're responsible for doing. But if you're in an environment and you as a supervisor are consistently just changing things up without clear communication, without clear expectations and clear instruction, you're going to see some problems with the lack of consistency. So remember, anytime you make some changes, you need to take the time again, go back to take the time to communicate and make sure they understand the new things that you're trying to introduce. So make sure the frequency of your communication and new instruction is consistent, so your employees will have the confidence that they'll be adequately equipped when they need to be. So again, if you're in a highly changing environment, but if you're consistent in your communication, your employees will have that confidence to say, you know what, things are changing. They change all the time around here, but I know my supervisor has got my back, and that we're going to be taught what we need to know before we head forward. So, and then make yourself consistently available for your staff if they need to come back to you for clarifications or questions. So be consistent in your communication. And that also means in a timely manner. That means don't just disappear for months at a time and then expect that communication to flow easily between you and your workers if you're not talking to them on a regular basis. So be consistent in your communication. Concise means exactly that. Keep the long-winded explanations. I remember seeing some movies too where the boss would stand up and give these big long speeches to try to motivate or teach something to the staff. That just does not work. People tune out. So, and depending on who you have working for you, they can be confused. So the more that you're trying to dump on them in one time, the more verbiage you use, the more long-winded you get, the less and less likely there will be comprehension and retention. So be concise, get to the point, make sure the important things you really want to get across, and then leave it alone. Don't try to draw things out to, I think there's a misconception that if we draw things out and explain more and more, deeper and deeper and deeper, that it shows the importance of what you're trying to pass on to them. Unfortunately, even though you might be trying to communicate that something's super important, that's why we're spending so much time on it, the actual application of that could be lost with just the verbiage and the time. So being concise is not being flippant. It's not being like dismissive. It's not being quick and then saying, oh, we don't have time for this. Rather, it is making sure that you can take that information you have to pass on, those instructions, and get them down to bite-sized chunks that can be easily communicated quickly without rushing things, if that makes those oxymoron, but it's true. You want to be quick, but you don't want to be rushing things. You want to make sure someone understands. But make sure they're in pieces of information that don't get too long-winded and the message is not lost in the lengthiness of it. When I mentioned connect, connecting is making sure there's a comprehension part of your instruction. Here's a big one. If you're doing communicating, I know there's many different methods, especially with electronic and others, even voicemails, etc. But if you're doing, to me, in my experience managing people, the most effective way to communicate is face-to-face. And you can say a lot more, and you can actually get a lot more from the person you're trying to talk to or instruct by seeing them. So with that in mind, make sure your body language is not sending a different message than your words. Oftentimes, I've actually viewed and watched when trying to consult with someone about their communication style with their employees, someone say something perfectly. I'm going, that was great. The delivery was wonderful. You had a positive tone to your voice, but their body language was conveying a message that I don't think the supervisor even realized that they were. It was a very dismissive, very standoffish body language. And it's like, so the person receiving the instruction could easily be very confused. Like, I hear what you're saying, I even hear how you're saying it, but I'm not seeing it. So when we communicate, really prep yourself and be conscious. Again, this is another chance if you have a colleague that is on a similar level of you or that you trust and could give you some positive feedback on, so how do I look or how do I sound when I'm giving these instructions? Because I'm afraid that it's not coming across the way I really hope it would. It's coming across very differently. And that's okay. I've always said that sometimes in giving, whether it's a presentation or just simply talking to someone, I actually like to practice in front of a mirror. Now, granted, I know everyone's going, I can't do that for every day-to-day communication. No, but it's something you can practice in your own time where you're looking at yourself. Imagine yourself having a conversation with a subordinate and then seeing what you look like in the mirror. You might be shocked. I know I was when I had a certain little thing I needed to tweak in the way I communicated, and I saw it in the mirror. It's like, I don't do that, but obviously here I am, I'm doing it. So make sure that you know how you look and how you come across when you communicate. And part of this comes along with the idea of making eye contact and practice active listening skills, which means there's a big component of listening. Now, I know we're supposed to be communicating instructions, absolutely, but you need to allow time for listening and responding so that the employee knows exactly what is most important to you, and also you're showing them that this is important to you, and that also their success and their ability to accomplish these tasks are important. And so that whole interaction of active listening skills really communicates the importance, makes them feel like they're worthwhile your time to instruct them on how to do it properly. So make that connection. Don't overlook that important piece. And about communicating to comprehension. So keep communicating. So keep talking it out. Keep coming up with more ways to reach your employees or try to communicate with them to the point where you know they're actually comprehending what you were trying to get across to them. If your employee continually doesn't seem to grasp what you're telling them, maybe it's, again, time to look at your own style or method of communication and see if there's something that needs to be worked upon. One way is to kind of try to find someone else to try and communicate the same instructions to your employees and see if that actually makes more sense to your employees than what you said. And you're like going, wait a second, but yeah, if I have a colleague who can give the same set of instructions that I think I'm giving, and my employees understand them but have a difficult time understanding me, then I need to really look again how I'm communicating, whether it's that body language or there's something else holding them back to understand. Maybe my instructions are coming across vague or too difficult. So anyway, you can just take a look at how you're communicating, because it is the responsibility of the manager or the supervisor to keep on communicating until the employee comprehends it. Does that mean you go to the nth degree? No, because the other thing you need to consider at some stage, at some point, is if you're continually communicating to an employee about their tasks and they're failing to do it, and you have someone else try to communicate the same thing, and you keep on having them ask questions or whatever, there comes a time where you have to really, this is again, don't hesitate part, have to realize that maybe they're not up for the task that you're hoping that they could do. And that's okay to get to that point. That's part of management as well. But it really is, again, remember, the responsibility of the manager to make sure things are understood. So keep communicating until there's a level of comprehension. And I slid in these next two C words, but they're really pointing back to self. But the self-control is a very important in good communication, because nothing will thwart your efforts more than if you lose it or begin talking down to your employee. If there's an issue that needs to be addressed and you can feel that your temperature's rising, it's really the best thing is to take some more time for yourself and be under control before you attempt to confront or correct or even communicate to that employee, whatever the situation. It might have nothing to do with them. It might be something else that happened in some other avenue of your job, and also now it's your time to sit down with them and talk, and boom, you're not on the right frame of mind. So, but if you're out of control, it's likely that you'll say the wrong things or the wrong way, and you might make things even worse. So you really do have to give respect to your employee if you expect to get it back. If you rely on that old mentality of I'm the boss and they just need to do it, then you will get employees that hopefully will do exactly what they're told, but they'll do nothing more. And they won't respect you even if they obey you. So always enter communication with a clear head and be in control. And you'll go a lot farther in being effective and getting across your message. So keep yourself in control. And a big one here for me is your self-confidence. You are the supervisor. You don't need to go to the extreme and lord it over them like I'm the supreme overlord or I'm the boss. But at the same time, don't apologize for the fact that you have a job to do. So communicate with confidence. You have a role, and you have a role and responsibilities and duties that you need your people to accomplish. So when you communicate, hopefully you're the person who knows what needs to get done, how it needs to get done. You see the big picture. So as long as you're not arrogant about it, your confidence will actually instill confidence in your employees. It'll reassure them that you actually know what you're doing, you know where your organization is heading, and that they can trust and follow you. So don't be shy to use your power to communicate to get everyone moving in the direction you know the organization needs to go. If you believe in yourself, and your people will believe in you too. So don't be afraid to communicate. Don't be saying, well, I don't want to bug them. They have stuff to do. It's your job to make sure they know that where they're going, what they're supposed to be doing. And I really encourage you too, even if you're working in you're on this call because of a kind of what we call frontline employees, or that kind of starting job employees, they still want to believe in their work. I don't know many people who are just collecting a paycheck. They want to believe in what they're doing. And it's our opportunity as supervisors to show them how the piece that they do, even if it seems small or it's the first level job, how it impacts our whole organization. And if you can communicate that to them and they can see that bigger picture, they're going to have more pride in their job. So that is it, folks. It's almost 10:30 already, and I can't believe it's that quick of a thing. But again, this was not meant to be exhaustive. This was just meant to give you a little tease, hopefully a couple tips here and there, hopefully a little challenging, a little encouraging. But if you want more help, if you're looking at your organization saying, man, we just have some communication issues, here at GLCYD, we can offer communication audits. We offer consulting, whether it's on the managerial level or even on the employee level for professional development. If you think you want more, we can give you more. So just feel free to contact us. I know if you've been sending in questions, we will follow up with you after the webinar, because we promise this will only be a half an hour to get you in and out. And so thank you very, very much for joining us this morning. Hopefully you got some good information, and I hope to see you back to more of our webinars in the future. And thank you, and have a great rest of your day.